After placing me back down on the ground, Renee transformed back to normal herself. Okay, so now you have your first conscious transformation under your belt. So, do you feel any better about it? I guess so. It's still a bit weird though. I don't know, I still feel a bit tingly. Is that normal? I asked, flexing my hand somewhat. Actually, that's not your transformation, Renee replied. Remember, you're using medication in order to jumpstart it. Medication has side effects, mainly being that tingly sensation. As long as you keep it down to just the 3 limited transformations per day, that tingling is the worst you'll feel, and it only lasts for a minute, before it simply fades away. It was at that point that we heard the door to the dojo swing open, and Renee's father strided in. "What's going on in here?" he said as he entered. "I heard rumbling, like there was an earthquake or something." "It's no problem, Dad," Renee said. "I was just helping Victor with his first transformation. You should have seen it. It was impressive. He thinks, or, well, I should say I think, that he was able to actually stumble on one of his natural abilities, which seems to be, at minimum, short bursts of extremely fast movement. I'm talking crazy fast, Dad. That's what the rumbling was." "You don't say," her father said as he approached me, standing towards the center of the dojo. "And exactly what part of your little training session caused that rumbling?" "Well, I was going through a Xiao Kundo set. You know what's in a set, right? For Xiao Kundo." "Yes, you have the standard movements and then the release at the end." "Well, yeah," I replied. "So I went through the entire set and everything seemed normal. Once I reached the release, I felt like I was moving faster than normal as I did the set release. And after it was all done, Renee informed me that it all took place within just a second. But it felt like I did the whole release. Time seemed to at least pass normally for me through my perspective. For Renee, it was only a second, which is a crazy amount of time to fit into a release, or to fit a release into. It's standard practice for the release that you're not allowed to stop until you fulfill the minimum of at least the same number of attacks as there are in the set. I very long ago bypassed needing to actually keep track of the number of attacks within the set, simply continuing until I ran out of energy for the set of attacks, as it far surpassed the number within a set. So, if I apply the standard measurement for, well, the number of attacks I can do as a human, or at least before all this happened, that means I squeezed no less than 68 attacks into under a second. It shouldn't be physically possible. Yes, that does sound very impressive. Even I couldn't attempt such a thing. It would take me at least 10 seconds to squeeze that number of attacks in. I've completely mastered Xiao Kundo, as well as countless other forms of martial arts. I'm a master. Yes, I'd say that Renee's assumption is quite accurate. You've most likely stumbled on one of the natural abilities of your household. The only question being what the limitations of that natural ability are. And we can't rely on your human measurements. The number of attacks you were able to squeeze in as a human being into one of those releases might be far different from the number of attacks you were able to squeeze in your werewolf state. Both your strength, speed, and ability far surpass that of a normal human, especially in your transformed state. For all we know, you launched hundreds of attacks. The only way to know for certain would be to observe the phenomenon myself. I possess strengths that Renee has yet to master, and possess a far greater level of skill. So it's much more probable that I'll be able to get a more accurate gauge. But I surmise that you most likely used the transformation tablets, which limits you to 3 transformations per day. Unless, of course, Renee is also going to tell me that you somehow mastered the transformation on your first attempt. No, he's using the pills, Renee replied. That would be impressive, though, she said, grinning. Yes, it would be. Stumbling upon one's natural wolven ability on your very first conscious transformation is very impressive nonetheless. If I had to gauge it, I'd say it's most likely your martial arts training that did the trick. Unlike the average person, those who train heavily in the martial arts gain an intense level of control and focus, both mentally and physically. These things are often required for utilizing one's natural wolven ability. So, in other words, your natural training in martial arts has accelerated the rate of speed at which you tapped into your natural wolven abilities. You did it without thinking about it, without consciously trying to activate a specific ability. The focus that you put into your martial arts stance and practice, your movements and attacks, triggered it on its own. This is good. It means if push comes to shove, you could use that ability in combat, even without having mastered it, which would be a good thing if you ever, got into trouble. Regardless, I was only coming to check on you, in case something went wrong. I thought it unlikely, but figured that I would be cautious nonetheless. Well, I'll leave you to it. Remember, the meeting is at 8 o'clock. Don't be late, Renee. I heard you, Dad, she said, as her father turned around, exiting the dojo and leaving, closing the door behind him firmly. After that, Renee and me went to a quiet reading room in her estate, where she started telling me about the nearby politics that I was most likely going to have to deal with as a member of the pack, as disagreements between neighboring packs was a fairly common occurrence. Apparently, her father's pack territory was bordered by 3 different packs. All 3 of them were smaller than his own, but that didn't mean that they were to be disregarded. First, there was the Solstedt pack to the west, led by Eliza Solstedt, who was apparently a near 400-year-old werewolf. Then, to the north, there was the Soet pack, led by a man named Raven Soet, a man of Native American descent. Apparently, his pack was primarily on tribal land, and consisted mostly of Native American members. And then, finally, to the south, there was the Galleon pack, led by a man named Richard Galleon. Of the 3 packs, that was the one that held the most power, and that her father's pack came in confrontation with the most, as Richard Galleon was a very power-hungry man, and was always attempting to try to expand his territory, making moves through the council or in person, pushing bounds. In fact, the council had to step in on many occasions and order him to cease and desist specific actions. He reaped the punishment. The Council of Wolves, Renee actually informed me, effectively formed the Wolf Military. That was part of what being one of the council members meant, that should widespread confrontation emerge, they, the 10 strongest packs, would unite as a single military presence and act against anyone who contradicted the best interest of the werewolf society. Meaning, if a single pack steps out of line, refuses to pull their weight, continues to break the rules, then the council is able to mobilize in large numbers of very powerful wolves. Essentially, it could be a 10-on-1 fight, which no single pack is able to withstand. Wipe you out if that was their choice. But usually it didn't come to that, at least according to Renee. According to her, even in the most extreme circumstances, they don't simply kill all the wolves in a pack. Beat them senseless, maybe. Take them prisoner. But normally, the one who faces the brunt of the punishment is the pack leader, as they are the one in charge of the actions and behavior of that pack. The things that the members of that pack do are within their range of responsibilities, part of being a leader. Even in these extreme circumstances, the leader is the one who is primarily punished, usually by stripping him of his right, meaning that he is disallowed from leading that pack, and someone within the council will either choose a new leader for that pack from its surviving members, or allow the pack to cast a vote and elect a new leader through whatever means that they decide is most appropriate. It all really depends on what happened to gain the spurn of the Wolf Council. The wolf in charge is usually banned from even being a member of that pack, cast out, and basically forced to find new footing in a new pack, which is a difficult task, especially for one who is deemed to be a breaker of rules and troublemaker to the extent that they could be stripped of leadership. So they're hard-pressed to find anybody willing to accept them as a member. Usually what ends up happening, according to Renee, is that anyone forced into that position, which is exceptionally rare, ends up having to spend the rest of their life fending for themselves, which is a dangerous proposition for any werewolf, or become essentially an employee of the council themselves, not a member of any of their specific packs. No, rather like being forced to take a job as a public servant. It's like doing a job that you despise for the rest of your natural life, which can range in a great number of ways, depending on how the council feels about you and the nature of why you were stripped of leadership.